Good evening. We are live. Welcome to Breaking into Hollywood. We're excited to have you with us again this evening. And we are very blessed this evening to have a special friend and guest, Professor Marilyn Horowitz from that little suburb of Los Angeles known as Manhattan. So I'm gonna share with you just for a moment a little bit about Marilyn, because she's a woman of many achievements and accomplishments in life, and you'll understand why I'm so excited that she's joined us. So indulge me, Marilyn. Welcome, Marilyn. Thank you for joining.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
And I am going to talk about you in the third person as if you're not here.
Oh, God.
Exactly. So an award-winning New York University, NYU professor, author, producer, Manhattan-based writing coach, Marilyn Horowitz works with successful novelists, produced screenwriters, and award-winning filmmakers, of course. Her passion is helping novices get started. And since 1998, she's taught literally thousands of aspiring screenwriters to complete a feature screenplay, no small feat that, using her trademarked method. And that's pretty fascinating. She has created this entire methodology. She's also a judge for the Fulbright Scholarship Program for film and media students. Very impressive. And in 2004, Marilyn Horowitz received the coveted New York University Award for Teaching Excellence. So apparently you know what you're doing over there. Professor Horowitz has authored 6 books to help writers learn her proprietary system. And impressively, the college version, she has middle, what is it, college and high school and middle school, I believe, versions. But the college version is a required text at both NYU and UC Long Beach. 2 of her books have been used in the Lights Camera Literacy Program, taught to over 1,000 kids in Maryland's Montgomery County Public School System as well. So Professor Horowitz writes for Script Magazine, pens a monthly column for MovieOutline.com, and if you're not familiar with them, take a glance. Both of these are very popular, very worthwhile online magazines. She's published in Now Write, screenwriting anthology published by Tarcher Penguin, and the 2014 edition of The Expert Success Solution. And if that's not enough, her upcoming novel, The Book of Zeb, is being released this December 2014. Professor Marilyn Horowitz has taught more than 100 classes, seminars, and workshops across the country. She travels a lot for groups including the Writers Guild East, Philadelphia Writers Conference, Script DC, Screenwriters World East, and the Great American Pitch Fest. And as nice as DC and Philadelphia may be, you should also know she hosts periodic writer retreats in Tuscany, Italy. Why aren't we all in Tuscany, Italy right now? Professor Horowitz has written several feature-length screenplays, and her production credits include films such as Caleb's Door, Found in Time, Nocturnal Agony, The One, and also Warner Brothers' And Then Came Love, starring Vanessa Williams. I'm tired just thinking about what you've done.
Thank you.
I have to take a nap now. Marilyn, welcome. This is great. This is great. So, Marilyn, we have a very, very enthusiastic, dynamic group of people here, screenwriters primarily, some hyphenates here at Breaking into Hollywood. So this opportunity to spend an hour with you is a real gift, and I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
So let's just dive right in, and people feel free to ask questions as you typically do, because Marilyn, I've known you, I don't know, for some years.
Yes, we've known each other, I think, since the first Author 101 University, maybe eight years, something like that.
Oh my gosh, okay. Yeah, I'm so liberated from calendars and time frames, but yeah, it's been a while. And by the way, anyone, okay, so I should promote that. Marilyn is New York based, but she will be in LA at the Westin LAX starting, I believe it's late next week, Thursday, a week from Thursday.
It's the 23rd through the 26th.
Okay, so the 23rd through the 26th at the Westin LAX. For any of you who want to come to Author 101 University in general, or more specifically to meet Marilyn, we will be, both of us, from the 23rd to the 26th at the Author 101 University of Ed. So that's a little promotion right there. But let's dive in, Marilyn. You've been teaching screenwriting and students long before we met. You're what I call one of the truly committed.
Yeah.
And so let's just dive in and say, when you're beginning, when you meet these screenwriters who have talent, who have written some screenplays, who don't really have they have not yet constructed their team, they haven't yet been sold or produced. What are some of the what do you perceive are some of the key ingredients or tips, or where do you start framing up for them how they make their way in the world?
Well, the hard part is that I have to put my glasses on to think. It must be known that the very first thing is, Gary, because you were such a successful producer, is that you really have to consider your audience. And this is the thing that's not done. Because I'm New York-based, I work on a lot of very unusual and independent projects. But the law is, and it's really the only one, is if you can be an audience yourself and respond to your material as if you're watching it on the screen as you start to dream it up, your audience, which is much like you, will like it. And really, whatever mysteries there are about the creative process, and there are some, the bottom line is we're our first fan. We have to be. And we are taught not to be. We're taught to be self-effacing and modest and not think we're good. But in order to be successful, instantly, and I think you could attest this, you have to have a certain kind of childlike glee in telling a good story. You must invest in the joy of it, because the joy is what's communicated. Even if it's a scary story. I think that's the key, which is you have to understand that you're part of the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. No judgment about what type of story, as long as you are entirely captivated, and I hate to use that phrase, but the inner child celebrates and is excited about this experience. It reminds me of, we had a guest on some weeks ago, wonderful gentleman, who quoted George Lucas, and I'm going to get it wrong, but fundamentally the line was so essentially what you're describing, which is how he sort of came to Star Wars. It was like, tell the story that you want to see.
That sums it up, except for one small caveat, which is that if you're not a producer, this is an interesting thing, Gary, because I've worked with so many people all through the process, is that it's easy for us to say, I come from an entertainment family background, you're a producer, so we have a sense of the overview of the business, of the process, of how things look when they're finished, but many writers don't. And so what I tried to do with my writing system was to create a way for almost like a trail of breadcrumbs, so that the writer who was inside the jar in some strange way could read the label while he or she was still inside, if that makes sense. Because the creative process is mysterious.
Yes, and it's easy. It has demons and goblins and creatures lurking in this labyrinth, and it's easy to get lost and to get off balance. I understand that creative process.
Yes.
So what you're saying is you've given people a way to peer over the hedge and get and retain some sense of perspective about what they're doing, where they are in that process, and what the outcome will look, feel, and taste like. Correct?
Very much so. Very much so. But there's a caveat there, and there are many writing systems that are very, very good, but the danger for the beginning writer is to get so involved with the mechanics of the file cards or the board or whatever the tropes of the system are, that it shuts them down, and that freedom, which is where the spark of originality is shut down before they ever, oh my God, this thing can only be 3.5 pages long. Well, the question is when. Yes, when you send it to you, but when you make it up the first time, it needs to be able to be half a page or 30 pages. A writer has to have a sense of freedom and also a way to find control, and that's the hardest thing for someone like me to teach. And when you produce a movie, as you know, the hard part when you're giving notes in that development process is the understanding of the different rhythms. I mean, everybody wants the same thing, but it's a different process.
Yeah, I am a believer. It's kind of like, as a producer, I've always felt that photography is lovely, but we make our film in post. you know, we're capturing as much as we can. We're being as intelligent and logical and smart and strategic as we can. But frankly, we're just hoping we've got all the right ingredients, because when we go into the kitchen, which is the dark edit room,
sure,
that's where we're going to make our film and find. And so I think that photography, there's an analogy there between the period of principal photography and the early draft, if you will.
Yes, indeed.
And in the early draft, the job of the writer for me, and I hear this is what you're saying, it's don't worry about the refinement process. Don't worry about some fantastic ideas you have about what ought, should, or could be down the road, but rather your job is to capture and put down on paper, as imperfectly as it may be, but true to the heart of the character, true to the heart of the storyline, true to the bigger feeling, tone, and vision that you have creatively, as much as you can, as fast as you can, and don't worry if it comes out to 133 pages, or this scene is that short or this long, or needs to be expanded or refined. That's going to happen in post.
Well,
and when I say post, in the analogous post of writing, not in actual post production.
Yes, if I can expand on that and just say that the way that writers would talk about it would be to say that all writing is rewriting. And the problem that first-time writers have is that there's so much ado about the process that you're made to feel so, unconscious. What I always say that if we writers listen to everything, we'd be like kids who would be embarrassed about their process of learning to walk. We'd go through 3 or 4 of these books, we'd take some courses, and we go, all right, I give up, I guess I'm just going to crawl. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
I love that.
I think the most important thing to say to beginning writers, and even writers, I have the same problem every time I work, is that we can't worry about being messy. We have to just kind of suspend our disbelief and remain focused on the goal, which is to tell an entertaining story.
Amen. So here's the rub. I could not agree with you more. I believe that most of us, human creatures, have a real struggle, a real tussle with objectivity, especially when it's our own thing. I smile when I think about all of the emails and the pitches and the need to frame out qualitatively what the outcome will be before we really, because people always say to me, when you made X film, did you know it would be successful? And the answer is absolutely, of course not. Had no idea. We never know until the audience tells us so. It is what the audience says. Like it or not, it is what the audience says. And so people often feel the need to sort of preordain how successful or what kind of audience or what box office. None of us are very objective, if the truth be told. We have no sense of it until we're there. So in this process, this messy world that we're describing, God bless that it's messy, because that's the fun of it.
Sure.
And so while we're in the mess, when you work with these writers who are like these new, these delicious indie films that are happening all around New York and all this cool stuff, and even before they get to that point, what litmus do you use for your students, for these producers and screenwriters that you're collaborating with? How do you know when that script is ready to sort of unveil to the world? That's threshold number 1 from a pragmatic standpoint.
Okay, well, I think you're asking me a few different things, and I'm going to ask you a little bit discursively. The first thing is that the diagnostic tool that Hollywood has always used, and it's the only thing that makes sense, is the log line. Because the log line is a terrifyingly simple map. And I'm going to digress for a second and tell you a story. I once went to see a very, very famous guru, an Indian guru who had come to America, and I said, tell me the meaning of life. And he sang me a song, and the song was, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. And he said, all wisdom is contained in that song. So, like a log line is similar to that idea. right? Because in a
Yes.
log line, you have
Right.
when my main character is forced to do something, they
Right.
must sacrifice X, Y, and Z or consequences. Yes?
Absolutely.
So it's like the guru singing me that silly song. It took me 20 years to understand that he was right. So let me save everybody time. So when you tell a story, whether it's at the beginning or the end, the basic story is there's a person and they're going along merrily, 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 and then something happens which throws them out of their everyday life and forces them to make very difficult choices that cause them to change. And there is a cost for that because stories are a form of panacea, they're a form of catharsis, they're a form of how we understand our lives, and what we fear the most is change. And all good stories are about how someone changed and either survived or didn't, right?
Amen.
I mean, you've got to reduce it to its purest form.
Right.
And so when you're a writer, if you can write down a little capsule of what you're trying to do, who, what, when, where, and why, and you can hang on to that somehow as you're rowing your boat through this crazy stream of your story, and you hold on to that when the thing goes into production. You understand, because you can't really fix anything in post. If it's not in the script and you didn't shoot it, within reason, you can't make it up. You have to go back and do it again or whatever, right?
Correct.
So you want to try to nail it. So for me, you need something like a simple nursery rhyme, row your boat, right? A log line format as a creative person to keep you sane. It's almost like a Rubik's Cube or a ball that you squeeze, but you always go back to this idea that there's a Rosetta Stone of story that you're always finding.
Yeah, that is your true north.
True north. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's not even magnetic. It's true north. And
If
if
I
you
said
can
that, I could have not spoken for the last 5 minutes. Thank you. Yes, true north.
Hey, that's what we're here for. I'm trying to make a log line out of what you just said. I love that. But it's so true. And we get so lost in our heads. But if you have that to come back to, I would put it in big bold letters on the whiteboard of your life on your wall.
Absolutely.
You know, and literally walk by that and notice it every time you go back to sit down and write. It really probably does save an enormous amount of time.
Years.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I've always had this notion, and it's based on, I guess, my early years when I was representing as a manager, representing writers, and my writers were very young, professionally speaking, not age-wise. They were all different ages, but they were as different as night and day, one from the other. But they were not people who had ascended, because I was so young and green and new that no one with any history or experience would want me, and water seeks its own level. So we grew up together, right? One of the things that I noticed across my experience was it seemed to take at least a handful of scripts before someone really sort of got into the rhythm of not of screenwriting, but of who they were as a screenwriter.
Yes, about
and
three.
Those are totally different things, right?
Very, very well said. Very, very astute.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I'm wondering if I had been wise enough back then to counsel writers in the way that you're describing your experience of that art form, that craft, that process, I might have actually truncated some of my clients' time frames or experience. But I love what you're describing about. I've talked about log lines quite often, but never in the way exactly that you're describing it, and I've certainly never sung that song.
It's the first time I sung it on the air.
Yeah, but well, we welcome it because it makes such a profoundly good point.
Well, the mechanics have to be simple.
Yeah. So let me rewind just a moment, because you said I was making several points, and one of them was about the log line. And was there something else that jumped out? Was there something?
Well, then you talked about how when is it ready to be finished? How do you know when to put it in the marketplace? And that is a huge question. There's a famous homily that says movies are made 3 times: once when they're written, once when they're shot, once when they're edited, and recently once when they're marketed. So 4 times. So there are at least 4 iterations. Part of I've been a writing coach for 15 years in addition to my other work, and I've worked with hundreds of people on a one-to-one basis. And part of the reason I get paid so well is because I know when things are done, and I always say it's because I'm a good cook. And I think that screenplays are like a roast. There's a moment when you have to take them out of the oven, and you have to know when to do that, and that's part of the art of it. You know what I mean? There's a moment when, you know this from your own profession, there's a moment when they're still juicy, they're structured well, and they haven't been overwritten so they feel dry. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, yes, overthought.
Overthought, overcooked. Same concept. So to me, my job as a coach is to say to my student, okay, it's done. It goes to the copy editor. Let's send it out. Let's get some beta. Let's beta test it. Let's send it to a few contests. Let's send it to Sundance. Let's send it to Gary, who's your uncle. Let's get some concrete feedback. And unless and this is another secret for writers, really. When you're doing this process, if 3 people don't have the same problem, don't fix it. Because there's a moment where it's all about consensus. And that's until it comes to someone like you, and it's bought, and then you now are putting together the package, and Tom Cruise says, well, I like that, but I really am not going to have blonde hair. So you as the writer have to start now dealing with the village that it's going to take to get this movie made. And that's where the real heartbreak comes in. That's why you have to enjoy the creative process, because the moment you become successful, you now hell is other people, right? Isn't that what Jean-Paul Sartre said?
Yeah, but for other people, creativity would be a blast. I have always described the hell of filmmaking as succeeding to the point where you're asked to make a sequel. There is nothing as unfun.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, sequelitis is a pernicious disease, and I pray no one's successful enough to experience it.
That's wonderful.
Skirt the edge of that success. But anyway, yeah, I think when you get into those, where success has many parents and egos and whatever, and yes, then suddenly it's like there are interesting conversations about things that really should never be the focus of a creative meeting.
Precise.
And yet that's human nature, and you go, okay, we're going to manage this process, and that's where your degree from the Fletcher School of Diplomacy does come in very handy. You listen deeply, and you nod knowingly, and you say, I'm going to include all of your brilliant comments, and then you go do what. But I want to go back just for a moment, because you said something, and I think it bears repeating. This is so key. Because I think at a certain point, a lot of creatives, not just writers, all forms of creatives, get insecure about their work.
Yes.
And so when you do go to that moment when you sort of part the curtain and you invite in a selective way, you invite feedback. So you understand, is that roast ready? Am I supposed to pull it out of the oven right now? And
Sure.
there is that moment where you might have to invite a person or 2 or 3 or 5 into the kitchen and say, here, I'm cutting off a little, take a taste, tell me if it's ready.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right?
But that's why I'm saying you have to only trust 3 people. Like, don't no one. Everybody is an individual. You can't trust one person.
Yeah, no, it's got to be a small village, and that village can be a screenplay contest. It can be script analysts. It could be a coach. It could be friends who, not family and friends. I actually don't like that idea. I think you need to go people who actually have some sense of the business. Maybe one person whose taste in films or their literacy about story, their love of literature and filmmaking, whatever. Maybe one of those people, but generally not. And then you go and you say, tell me what you see. What could be better, or did you like the way it was? And if you get if you give it to 10 people and you get 10 different sets of criticism, you just won the lottery.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And
Very profound. Yes.
But if you've got 6, 7, 8 people all picking on, that particular scene with that water bottle, that threw me, it confused me, it was not natural or unclear or whatever, then you got to fix the water bottle.
Yes. Yes, I mean that's the rule. I'm currently filming when you do books, when you market books, you use some of the film techniques. And one of the things that you do is you if you can, you make a book trailer, and you put that on your website. And I've been working on the book trailer. It was almost as hard to do as the book, because it's short and it's all images with text. And finally, after 3 weeks last night, we got a decent thing, and I sent it to the 5 people that are sort of on my publicity team, and every one of them disliked one of the pictures. So it was, as you say, that was victory, because that once the picture's out, finally, after weeks of this, and it's the same thing. But the thing I'm going to say is that as the creator, when I got the first cut of it, this is the analogy, I didn't like the music, I didn't like the images, and I had the guy who created this change everything around before I ever showed it. And that's the other thing that I want to say to writers, which is you have to find a way to know if it's good, not if you think it's good. And you have to find a quantifiable technique. So one of the reasons I created my writing method is that there's several. It's a visual writing system, and there's something in it called the Mythic Journey Map. It's a sort of centerpiece of the system, and it's like a template. And the idea is you can use it to create the piece, but you absolutely can use it to diagnose the piece. And for example, on my website, we have 64 breakdowns of current films, including Pretty Woman. And you will see that it absolutely meets all the notes in this very simplified version of Joseph Campbell's Mythic Journey. It's a very simple way of working, but it's always right. It's never wrong, because we've beta tested hundreds of films, and so when you write a screenplay, if you hit the notes, even if your way of doing it is very original, like a Darren Aronofsky, or Charlie Kaufman, it's in there. You know what I mean? It's like a house. It's like there is a fundamental structure of story. If you can locate the foundation of your work before you send it out, at least you can be sure that it's well structured. And in Hollywood, that's so important that, and in New York, I mean, movies have to have a story that is filmable, that's accessible, that the audience can realize. And so again, if whether it's not my system, but you have to find some way where you, as a creative, as you would be as a producer, where you're absolutely sure that this thing is bulletproof. Doesn't mean scenes don't need to be reworked or things like that, but as far as it goes to a movie, if you filmed it, it would play. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. I mean, this is the thing that, as a producer, I wring my hands about the most.
Yes.
It's and why we spend so much time doing these sort of these pre-flight checks.
Yes, well, it's a shame we didn't meet a long time ago, because I saved a lot of people a lot of heartache.
Yeah. I mean, I don't do for others. That's basically what you do for all these other productions and groups and writers.
Sure.
That I do have done for my films, my children.
Yes.
But yeah, absolutely, because as you said before, there's the old adage: you can make a bad film from a good script. You can't make a good film from a bad script. You can't make a complete story from an incomplete script. Is another way of saying it.
That's very key. That's so key.
Yeah, and so if your characters are missing some essential, and I say essence-related pieces, whether it's plot or dialogue or performance of any kind, you're going to be deeply sad in that dark, quiet room called the edit room.
Sure.
When the time comes, because it's unless you have the budget to go out and reshoot, which is tough. So yes, I agree wholeheartedly. Now I've got to ask you a question. So I'm going to switch gears just for a moment, and then we'll come back. Because I love this. These are riches. These are truly golden nuggets. You come from a history of you come from an entertainment family. You didn't come into this as it wasn't shocking that you chose this path, correct?
No.
So tell us about how you got into it. Tell us about your family and your sort of early fascination. What drew you into it, and what was the path that you walked?
Well, it's an interesting story. I'll try to be short. My grandfather was a well-known movie lawyer. He represented people like Lillian Hellman and Ernst Lubitsch, and Charlie Chaplin was his great friend. And
oh my gosh!
There's a famous story about Charlie Chaplin was always being hit with paternity suits, and my grandfather and Charlie looked a bit alike each other. They were the same sort of shape and general appearance. And there was more than one occasion where Charlie would get on a plane and my grandfather would be, on the cruise ship or whatever in the overcoat and the hat, and he would receive the subpoena. So, and he also used to tell a story about John Ford, the famous Western director, and he said, "So how did you make your film so inexpensive?" And John Ford is reputed to have said, "Oh, I use real bullets."
That's a great line. I love that.
So I grew up sort of steeped in that kind of background, and my grandfather became the general counsel for Columbia Pictures, which is a position my father then held, and then later my aunt was assistant general counsel. So there was sort of we were all movie lawyers on that side, and so I grew up, with that kind of sensibility. And I actually was a fine artist, and I got a scholarship to NYU, and I signed up for what I thought was the painting, but when I got there, it was painting education, and I thought, my God, I can't spend my life teaching children how to cut out paper dolls. This is not who I am. And this is, a while back, and I said, well, what else do you have? And they said, oh, we have a film school. And I laughed because, I come from to me that was like, going to learn how to make carpet. You're going to get a college degree in carpet. I'm like, how hard can this be, Well, I certainly live to regret those words because I was one of the first, women in my film school to ever direct a film, and I made a film, and I sold it to cable, and I kind of knocked around because, I came from a family of business people, and I've always been an artist, I'm a creative person, and then sometime after a lot of, I'd been in production and so on and so forth, I wrote a novel. And which was not a very good novel, but it was about a serial killer and his sister. And I finished it on a Thursday. I went to a cocktail party, and a producer actually bought it for me on Monday. It was unpublished. It was just because it had a pretty good hook to it. It was not a good book. And I then spent the next 2 or 3 years of my life being tortured by this producer. And at the end of it, they were going to take the book away from the screenplay away from me. And I had a dream in which Joseph Campbell appeared to me. Bill Moyers, and of course George Lucas said he never could have made Star Wars if he hadn't discovered George. Anyway, so he appeared, and Joseph Campbell said to me, "What do you need?" This is a lucid dream, and I thought, well, gee, what am I worse at than writing? Oh, geography. I said, yeah. How about a map? In my dream, I was so embittered. I'm like, and he said, well, if I give you a map, will you use it? And I said, well, I'm from New York. I don't know. And I woke up. And I wrote down these 12 circles that sort of could come out of my head, and from there became the Mythic Journey map. And then, soon after that, I was asked to teach, to take over someone's class. And from the moment I started teaching, like the first day, people walked in and said, "Can you help me with my script? Can you help me with my novel?" And it was like a pet rock, I just put me in water, and within a year, I had a big business, and that's how it went.
Unbelievable. So you sort of learned, and then the business through the lens of all of your family's business savvy, and then you brought your own artistry to it because obviously that's your bent.
Right, but the nachas was sort of innate. You know what I mean? I sort of understood how things worked and how much things cost and how to It must have been just from sitting at the dinner table for all those years,
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, the things that you didn't consciously, but obviously did pick up, just by, it's in the water, it's in the air, it's in the conversation.
Sure.
What a great time, my God. And John Ford, people always say, what was it that got you into the business? And because I did not grow up in a entertainment family, let alone a film family.
So how did you find your way in?
I just fell in love with story when I was very young. I lived inside of books from a very, very young age. That was where I found my life, where I got excited, where I fell in love, and it just was catnip to me on a sort of a soul level. I read a lot, and so that eventually became music. It eventually became other things, any form of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I did fall in love with certain filmmakers around my college years. It was Michael Antonioni, it was David Lean, it was Sergio Leone, it was John Ford. Then there were certain filmmakers, and then there were certain films. Like I don't know if I fell in love with John Ford. I certainly fell in love with The Quiet Man.
Oh my God, one of the best films ever made.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I fell in love with the filmmaker, but I fell in love with The Third Man. Some of those classic bits of storytelling. Sometimes it was actors I would follow from film to film. Others it was the filmmaker. Others it was just a one-off experience. Early Coppola's films. Early Coppola was someone that really inspired me.
Oh, me too. Sure, absolutely.
But I thought he was so adventurous and unexpected in some of his choices that it was irresistible to me, and that was what then sort of post college it sowed the seed that eventually, after some dalliances and detours, I found myself moving to LA for that reason. But
where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in New York, but I grew up really from the age of 10 as a teenager. I grew up in San Francisco, the Bay Area.
Oh, wonderful!
Which was an amazing time. It was post-Beatnik era, but it was that era when Ferlinghetti and Ginsberg and all those guys opened up City Lights in North Beach.
Oh my God, how wonderful!
With San Francisco, Sausalito, it was leading in, to the, of course, those latter '60s, early '70s years, post-free speech. But then I was a freshman at Berkeley in '68, so it was an amazing time. In the arts, politically, musically, and every other way. So that was my way in. But I see that we're also 40 minutes in, which is ridiculous. We're gonna have to do a 4-hour call tonight. So, but I'm curious because how many novels have you written?
Well, the one that's coming out is my second, but I really feel that it's my first novel because the novel that I wrote that I sold to Hollywood was 20 years ago, and I didn't know all this then. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. Well, great, because I know you've written screenplays and other things.
I've written lots of things, and I think that the thing that you and I would both have to say to people who are listening, who are young writers, before we take questions, is that if we had one piece of advice to give, it's that you have to write, you have to make up a lot of stories, right?
Oh my God! As a percentage.
Yes.
I hate to think of the number of failed efforts, failed initiatives, development projects that were screenplays that were in their 7th or 17th draft, even that were shopped. That were sometimes it takes years for you to lose your. It's not that you lose your commitment. In fact, I've never lost my. Once I commit to a film, I'm like, because I pick carefully things that I've fallen in love with.
Sure.
And if I fall in love with it, because I believe what you said earlier, if I feel and see and taste, I know this story, I'm living this story, I love this story,
sure.
And I believe that audiences will, that actors will, that filmmakers will, that audiences will, then why would I ever give up? So there are external circumstantial reasons why films don't make it into production or make it to their financing or the big screen experience. There are certainly those. The number of films that did not make it, not because they were of lesser merit, but because circumstantially they just didn't survive, would outnumber the films I've made by, I'd have to, conservatively 10 to 1.
Wow.
I don't know. I'm guessing. Who knows? I don't keep track. But those projects, and I would say this is true not just because I'm a producer. I believe it's true for all of us, and I mean for every artist and every creative individual in any area of endeavor. The ones that don't get birthed out into the world in a big public way are no less valuable. They teach us as much. They introduce us into deeper relationships with people that we're going to collaborate with in the future as much as the ones that do succeed. There are so many calories on those plates that we can't adjudicate or judge self, God knows, based on how many times we hit the ball versus the times we didn't.
Amen.
So tell us about. Give me the log line on the Book of Zeb, your new story, your new book.
Can two ordinary people prevent a terrorist from blowing up the UN in Israel?
That's a great question. I think we have to stay tuned to find out. Fantastic. which makes me think of one thing. You're a multidisciplinary artist. That's probably not the right way to say it, but I'm going to say it that way. So two companion questions. One is any advice for the multi-talented or the hyphenated writer slash, and similarly, as in the case with your book, I have to ask you, did you write this with a movie in mind? Was that part of your gestalt?
Well, I use my writing system. I've always worked with an equal number of novelists and screenwriters, though I've never sort of, because in order to retain my brand, I've never publicized the fact that I've worked with novelists who've been published by Doubledays and Scribners. I mean, and the writing system, as I say, because I have this idea that there's a universal story that is like a Rosetta Stone, that there's endlessly a translator, that there is this translator, and there's a story. That the advice for people is really. I just was interviewed, and they said to me, "Do you have any strange habits?" And I said, "Well, the only one that I'm willing to share is the fact that when I'm writing, I read and watch movies as I'm doing it. It's like I'm eating and it's like I'm growing and composting at the same time." And I think that the advice is to really respect your process. I mean, that's the overriding theme is respect your process. And a trick that is not widely used but is really great is you find one piece of art that you love, and you think, what is my version? Not, can I copy it or whatever? I should be so lucky that I could copy The Great Gatsby. You know what I mean? But the idea that you find something that inspires you. And I had a student who made a wonderful film, which was a romantic comedy, that the name of which escapes me, but it was a very funny, good piece. It got good distribution, whatever. And he had so much trouble that what he would watch every day before he worked was, this is almost funny in itself, was Hearts of Darkness.
Oh my God.
And he would watch it, and he would call me crying, and he'd say, look, if he could make that movie, I can write a silly romantic comedy. And I would say, Jack Benny said, dying is easy and comedy is hard. I said, I think if you're writing a romantic comedy, why can't you find a nice romantic comedy to, why do you have to make this into such a drama? But the idea is that he had this one thing, and it was his touchstone. Right. For me, I mean, I remember seeing Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I remember the chills when he stood up to do the filibuster, and I realized that everything I ever wanted to make art about was that one person could make a difference. And for me, that became a central driving thing of everything I've ever done in my work, and it just, I was lucky. I got the message for myself, And so what I would say for writers, whether they're young or not or whatever you're doing, find that thing that really gets you, and just think, what's my version? And your version could be a dance. It could be, the dance of The Godfather. They're making plays of scenes from a marriage. I mean, it's art is art. The translation is a problem, but the story is a story.
Yeah.
Make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. I always ask, because I've known, I had a very dear friend who was, and this was pretty early on in my tenure in Hollywood. I had a writer friend who was really gifted, and I'm one of those people who, when I go to write, I need absolute quiet, no distraction. It's got to be, I need to go into the cave.
Right.
And that cave has to be sort of deprived of sensory input on all, But my writer friend listened to loud, sort of certain, and every time it was with every script it was a different type of music.
Yes, there you go.
He would pick a certain type of, like in one script it was like this loud rock and roll, classic rock.
Interesting.
And I was like, oh my God, how can you even think? But that was the thing that drove him and kept him on track.
Sure.
So I had to say, okay, I totally respect that. Hold on one second. I'm trying to do something. We have a question, so hold on one second. I'm going to see if I have the technical ability to do this. Watch this. Whoops. Now, there we go. So Richard Close says, Joseph Campbell always said, follow your bliss.
He did.
And Richard, tonight I have two of my favorite writing inspirations on the same hangout, Gary and Marilyn. I have watched Marilyn's YouTube videos and found them informative and inspirational. I've corresponded, and I think there's more. So we couldn't fit it in.
Hi, Richard.
Richard, thank you so much. So let me come back to Marilyn. I think I did that right. Beautiful. Hold on, I'm getting these messages. I have to. We're without Bethan this evening, and I am like having one arm tied behind my back. So here's another comment, Marilyn. And she said, Joe, I've subscribed to her emails, which have changed. Your emails have changed the way he looks at screenwriting and
Holy cow.
And the process of seeing the movie as he writes.
Yes.
It. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary, for sharing Marilyn to the rest of the group. Well, thank you, Richard.
Wow.
High praise indeed.
Richard, I'll pay you later, okay?
Yeah, the check is in the mail.
Thank you so much. I'm blushing. Thank you.
Yeah. So, but wait a minute. I'm going to run out of. We need power here. Okay. We have electricity. Good. We paid the electric bill. Good. So if there are any more questions, I hope I have not overlooked other people's questions over the course of the last 40, 50 minutes because.
Well, the question is, does Richard have a question? We love the MASH note, but is there something we could actually help you with?
I don't know, but if anyone has a question, we're a dozen minutes from the end of the hour, so please do not be shy. We have Professor Marilyn Horowitz with us. Take advantage. This is a good moment not to be shy. And as great as these stories are, we know that not all of the questions that you have had along your journey have been fully answered. This would be a good occasion to ask. Because Marilyn is, you have I have no end of respect for not only the breadth and depth, but the diversity of your experience arriving at this moment, right? It's
back at you, Gary.
So please feel free. I know a lot of times what we find, Marilyn, in these hangouts is that sometimes people they get, they're so absorbed in what's going on and there's so many nuggets that they're sort of like processing that a lot of people tend to sit back and listen.
Sure, we could do a little recap of, I could tell you some of the great things you said and we'll see if that sparks some questions, you said some really great stuff, Gary. You said that, we need quantity, and so one of the questions might be, well, how many screenplays do you need to have written? That's a question that you could answer better than me.
Well, I don't know that there's an answer. What I would say is this. I want people to write a bunch of screenplays. One of the things that I see young writers do that I don't want to. I hate to be judgmental, so I don't want to say right or wrong, good or bad, or that's a mistake. And yet, my gut screams, don't spend too much time rewriting the same script. Don't spend.
That's wonderful.
Don't spend a year.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Gary, but I'm not technically, but I see there's a big white thing up on my thing here. Is that a question?
Yeah. So why is it? Oh, there it is. Could you elaborate on why it's like winning the lottery if you have different readers who do not have the same problem in the same spot in the script? Absolutely, Bianca, great question. Thank you. Marilyn, do you want to answer that?
Well, you said it. I didn't.
I did? Shame on me. Here's the thing. When you have imagine, Bianca, that you have a finished film and it's in the theater and you are listening to all of those wonderful people, your audience, come out of the theater and they're talking amongst themselves about the experience. They all have slightly different cues conversationally. They see different things impressed them, different scenes stood out for them. But overall, they either, you're going to find in general the gestalt is people really enjoyed the film or that film's going to disappear quickly. But what I was getting at, and I think what Marilyn would agree with, is that if you have a script and you've got a pretty consistent chorus of criticism from people that you trust, saying, that character or that relationship is unclear, or that scene just didn't, or the logic didn't hold together, I was very distracted by this level of coincidence or whatever it might be. It could be a lot of things. It's generally not going to be the color of someone's hair, but there could be a lot of things about which people seem consistently to get a little bit hung up on. If that's true, you've got a problem because the customer is always right. The audience in this case is always right. And if, however, everyone, like with Marilyn's book thing, everyone had one different image they didn't like, but they didn't all, right? If 5 people each didn't like a different slide, then the overall impression is you've got something that's working, because if there were 5 slides and they liked, each person liked 4 out of the 5, you're batting 800. That's
right.
like,
well, that's what you meant, Gary, when you said win the lottery. That's just to paraphrase so she understands. It's like it's what you're saying is that if everybody disagrees and they don't like some other part of it, it's probably pretty good.
Yeah. So
if everybody doesn't like the same thing, then you've got trouble. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. Now I just have to look. Oh, here's something different from Nancy. When looking for the 3 or the 10 people to review a script, should we be looking for contest judges, fellow script writers, paid coverage, or something else?
I will take that question, and I will say, please. Nancy, first rule is try not to pay for things when you're first starting. If it were me, I would want to do a cross-section. I would want to enter a couple of contests. I would want to give it to a trusted, an actual friend who I trust, who is not going to, I'm not going to lose the friendship over their comments. And I would want to get a teacher to read it. I would want to get about 5 different people. What's great about a contest is for about $50 or whatever, you get to actually enter your film into something that could make it happen, and also you will get feedback from someone who is sincerely interested. May not be that experienced, you tend to get what you pay for, but it's a good start. The time to use a paid consultant is after you've gone a couple of rounds with this. In other words, you really want to wait, and you want to marshal your resources, because really a lot of what you've got to spend your time doing is feeding your writing habit. And in my opinion, Gary may not agree, I think the most important thing is to get your butt on a plane and go out to California or come to New York and go to a pitch fest and meet people like Gary and me, and actually have to get yourself in there, because when you tell your story to someone who knows what they're listening to me, that's when you're going to get more knowledge than anything that you've ever written. I really believe that, because really ultimately writing is flesh on a skeleton. And if you don't know how to build the house or the skeleton, whatever metaphor you want to learn, and you don't understand how people like Gary really see stories, because their vision is what translates it to an audience, you're never going to really learn. So I would do that. And then only when I've done a lot of stuff and I have a good sense of what story is, then I would pay someone like me to evaluate it and look at it. But be very careful when you hire someone like me, and make sure. My first script consultant managed to ruin one of my scripts. And that's probably one of the reasons I started to do this work, because she was a perfectly nice person, but we didn't see, I didn't understand how she talked about story. You see what I mean? So make sure when you get to that point that you hire people who know what they're talking about.
Not all chiropractors are the right person to fix your ailment.
Right, even if they all know how to do it. Amen. I think there's another question.
There's a comment, but I just want to echo. By the way, I completely agree that you don't need to live in LA, but you do need occasionally to be able to get a couple of times a year, aggregate meetings, go to pitch festivals. And by the way, go to festivals that are in your geography, wherever that is. And pitching is really important. Having that sort of real live exchange is important, and there are now great opportunities for phone-based pitch festivals. I think Fade In has one. Anyway, I'm not endorsing things. That's not my purpose here. But do your research. There are some opportunities to connect with people in the business, to hear your pitches and exchange ideas that are done over the telephone. So that's an option as well. We do have another comment. Could you share a little on the business/marketing decisions during the writing process? In other words, it's my understanding producers look at the marketability of a script as they read and can tell within the first page or so if he/she can sell it. Could you share what things they look for?
Well, I'm going to say what we opened our hour with, which is right. When I first went to Hollywood, the first time I watched a script, the producer said to me, he said, there are only 3 questions you're ever going to get asked. Who's going to see it? Who's going to be in it? And how much does it cost? And not necessarily in that order. And I think that, Althea, that's what you mean. And what I'm going to say is, and I say this all the time, is that the answer to most of the great questions in life is another question. And that question is when. And the answer to your question is, when do you have to have these marketing considerations about a story? And in my opinion, you first need to create the story freely without these considerations. And then, before you spend a lot of time developing the story, that is a second draft, whatever, then you sit down with this template and you ask yourself these questions. So, and I really am very, very passionate on this thing, which is first create for yourself, create it however you like it and enjoy it. Then, before you invest a lot more time in it, that's when you have to look and answer these questions.
You know, you remind me, Marilyn, of a very successful author that I know who writes nonfiction.
Oh, really? Who's that?
Neil Strauss.
Oh, thank you.
So Neil Strauss had this. I don't know if it's appropriate to the screenwriting question at hand, but it was a very interesting idea. I never heard anyone say it. You write the first draft entirely for yourself.
Absolutely.
This is about as selfish an undertaking as you should ever imagine. The second draft you write for your audience.
Yes.
And the third draft, he says, you write for the haters to make it bulletproof, right? But
absolutely.
So there's a wonderful evolutionary, and I agree, at least spiritually, with what he's describing. I think initially you've got to write out of and just let it be messy and let it be a love fest and just the DNA of you coming out.
I agree.
I do think Marilyn's right. I think those are the 3 questions. Who's, tell me the log line. Who's going to be in it? Who's the audience for it? What does it cost? If there's, I don't know any producer that I would consider worth their salt who knows anything at the end of page 1, except we learn that they're arrogant. The simple, listen, there are certain things. If the first page is all about exploding bridges, then I might know this may not be for me. May not be what I'm looking for in that moment. But generally speaking, I think these concerns are down the road, and I still go back to the basic thing of when I was a kid reading a story. If it moves me, that's what I care about. I am in the business of telling stories that move people, whether your frame as a creator like Marilyn's is, the individual is powerful to create, to have influence in the world, to mean something, to matter. And whatever it is that gets you to your story or through the writing of your story is great. Ultimately, does this move us? I don't care if it's drama or comedy. And if it moves...
I couldn't agree more. And I'm happy Althea just commented. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make sense of this.
Go ahead.
Did she comment? I'm sorry, was there another flashing white thing up there?
I think there is, and I'm trying to... Hold on. How do I get this up? 1 second. There it is. Oh, that makes sense. But I think we skipped one. Alethea, was there something... Did I miss something? And why, golly gee willikers, is everybody muted? I don't even know. If you want, if you have the ability to speak, please do. I apologize for my technical lack of savvy right at the moment. Anyway, okay, so I guess that was the comment. Maybe there was more. But yeah, I think if we're in the business, we're in the transportation business, moving hearts, moving human hearts and minds.
Nice.
And if we do that, I always said this, and I'll repeat it here. I don't know if I've ever said it in a hangout, which is when someone would give me a script, and I decided this years ago, and I've never diverged. If you were to hand me a script and say, read this script, and I agree to read this script, I would never read that script as a producer. I would never read that script as a financier or a distributor or any other sort of business person. I wouldn't even read it as a director, a filmmaker. I would only read that script as one of two things. And first, I would read it as the lead actor being offered this role.
Wow.
Am I so compelled? Am I so lit up? Am I gonna am I gonna call up my agent and threaten them with bodily harm if they don't get me the script because it is such a textured, delicious, unexpected, surprising? I've got to be this character and go through this journey, this experience. That's number one. Secondly, can I imagine being just me, and I mean literally me, in the audience of a darkened theater experiencing this story with the cast of my imagination? And those are the only two ways I can read a script and know the truth of it, because everything else is way too neck up.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
So now I'm noticing that it is actually after 6 o'clock, and we are in danger of becoming pumpkins prematurely, but it is October and it is Halloween time. Mm. So I would love to say thank you. I think we should wrap this up. I see no more comments or questions, but thank you, everyone. And Marilyn, this has been an extraordinary conversation. I think we could have you on 10 more times. I think we've just scratched the surface.
No, thank you so much.
No, thank you, seriously. This is wonderful. And I was going to ask you what we're going to get into at Author 101, but folks, if you're able to be in Los Angeles the 23rd through the 26th, I feel like a carnival barker, and we'll be here all week, folks. We will be at the Westin LAX during that time for Author 101. Come say hi.
Yeah, what I usually say, Gary, if it's okay, is that since I don't get out to the coast very often, when I'm in New York, if people are interested, I offer a free 15-minute consultation, which you can call my office in New York and have. But since I'm going to be out there, if you want to meet with me for coffee or something, my information, go to my website and contact my assistant, whose name is Jafe, and we'll set up a 15-minute meeting. It'll be fun. Anybody who likes Gary is a friend of mine.
You're sweet. So, and by the way, for those of you who are not in California or can't be in LA for that, if you can, take advantage. It's well worth it to meet Marilyn. But if you can't, Jafe, her assistant, Jafe, and just go to, it's on the screen, www.marilynhorowitz.com, and that's where they'll find this opportunity for the consultation, Marilyn?
Yeah, they can just really call the office, which is, if you don't mind, I'll give the number. It's 212-600-1115, 212-600-1115.
Wonderful. Marilyn, you are too kind, and this has been amazing. I've enjoyed it myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. You're a wonderful host.
Thank you.
I look forward to we'll have that dinner when I'm in LA.
Fabulous. That's what I was hoping for. Wonderful. All right. Have a beautiful evening, everyone. And you, Professor Horowitz, thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.